Shalom from Israel, I'm Ariel Ben Aram. This week we begin to read the last book of the Torah, Devarim, usually translated as Deuteronomy. Our sage says that it's basically like a summary, some call it repetition, of the events that happened to Israel since the Exodus from Egypt. It's like a general summary. Literally it means things. And also people understand it the same root word as sayings. It's like what it was said or the things that happened. Both are actually complementary in this case, because what happened, the things that happened in some way were told. So it's like there were sayings in the process. We said a few times when we started to comment the books of the Torah since Bereshit, since Genesis, that every book of the Torah has a particular purpose, a particular message. So we said that the first book, Genesis, is about the creation. It's about God's creation. So the book of Exodus, Shemot, is about the freedom of Israel. It's the book of freedom. Then the third book, Vayikra, usually translated as Leviticus, has to do with our connection with God. In this context, we said many times when we were commenting on the portions of the book of Leviticus that it had to do with the spiritual connection that Israel has with God. That's why it is related to the service in the temple. That's exactly what it's about, our connection through this temple. Then we have Bamidbar, usually translated as Numbers, in which we said that the general purpose of this book is about our relationship with God, the way we related to Him in the narration of the Torah. Well, we have to pay close attention. And finally, Devarim is about the purpose, the reason, the mission, the identity, the mission that Israel has. So we have to really pay attention to this last book, because it is the book that tells us who we are, really. I mean, the other books are telling us even from Genesis, from Abraham down. The Torah is telling us what is our identity. It's defining for us our identity, which has to do, as we said before, with our connection with God, our relationship with God, and the mission finally in Devarim, the mission that we have as people, that we have as Israel, in terms of what the Torah is telling us that Israel is. What is the purpose? Which, as we know from these previous portions in the book of Numbers, had to do with settling in the Promised Land. So the whole purpose of our freedom from Egypt, our relationship, how we started developing our connection, our relationship with God, as the preamble, as the premises for the purpose, the end that we have as people, which is treated clearly, in a very, very defined way in the last book of the Torah that we begin to comment this week. We have to emphasize that in this last book of the Torah, indeed, it's about our purpose as people, as individuals, Jews, and also as the collective, as the nation. But we have to pay close attention to what is before. What is the root of this mission? What is the root of this identity? What is it based on? What is the origin? Because if we don't have that clear, probably we will lose perspective of what our mission is. In other words, this last book of the Torah, the whole purpose is the culmination of a process, so to speak, of an origin, a development that we see in the previous books. Summarizing, what we're trying to say with all this is that the entire Torah is about the Jewish identity. So that there's really nothing different from beginning to end that is not related to us. Everything is related to us. But again, we have to pay close attention now because we're about to enter the promised land, which is the purpose of our Jewish identity. We have a land for a purpose. We were brought out of Egypt with miracles that define also our, not just historical, but our emotional shape, our emotional identity, as the preamble, as the premises to do what we're gonna do actually in a land as a nation. We all know, based on our general education, that a nation is defined by a territory, by the people living in the territory, and by particular cultural traits that define this nation. So it could be language, could be religion, could be beliefs, could be even, in some cases, physical traits. So we know that the people, depending on the environment, depending on the area that they live in the world, they have particular physiognomical features. But in this case, the features of Israel are not physical, are spiritual, as we all know. So we are not a race. The only way we understand a Jewish race is a spiritual race, if there is such a thing as a spiritual race. But that's who we are. We're not defined by color. But we are defined by what the Torah is telling us of that who we are. So that's the starting point. So we have to, at this point of beginning the last book of the Torah, which is about, as we have said several times already, which is about the purpose of our lives, individually and collectively as a nation, we have to take into consideration what happened before. Since Abraham back to here. And before Abraham, the different developments of the shaping of what humankind is. Since Adam and Eve down to Abraham. So it's like that's the common denominator of humankind. So in other words, we, Jews and Israel, are part of humankind. We share that. But we have a particular mission which is defined, delineated thoroughly and specifically in the Torah. So let's continue reading for a moment the first verses. These are the words, as we said, Devarim could be words or sayings that Moses spoke to all Israel on the other side of the Jordan concerning the wilderness, in other words, the experience in the desert after the Exodus from Egypt. Actually, it's the opposite, the Sea of Reeds, the so-called Red Sea. So, our sages, some of our sages, because we have different opinions about what is the meaning of these sayings, but in general, they consider that the first things that Moses is saying to all Israel. It's like there are no exceptions here. So all Israel is united in front of Moses, hearing from them the things that he had to say. So he starts the sayings, the things that he is about to utter, to say, are related about the experience during these 40 years in the desert. So what they meant, we said that the last portion of the book of Numbers, Bamidbar, Parshat Masei, last week's Parshat actually, we're talking about the journeys. So these are the journeys that the children of Israel had, since the exodus from Egypt. So these journeys are connected actually to these Devarim, to these things that Moses is telling us. So it's like, first it's like a, so to speak, like a time-space description, from leaving Egypt up to about entering the promised land in Masei, Parashat Masei last week. And then we're talking about the things, the sayings that Moses said regarding these events that happened that he was mentioning in the previous portion, Masei. So our sages, as we were mentioning, they comment that the fact that Moses is making a summary, a recount of the events, is to call Israel, all Israel's attention. So it's like, hey, our building our connection and our relationship with God during these 40 years previous to entering the promised land, we had a lot. Many things happened from which we learned. So of course, the references to the complainings of the people in the desert, the golden calf, the exploration of the spies, etc., which, as we know, were episodes that were difficult for us, Israel, in this case, our ancestors, try to understand our connection, our relationship with God. It seems to be seen from this perspective from now, like 3,300 plus years afterwards. It's like we read it like, how could be so stubborn and so, making so much trouble to God, having everything and still complaining and all these things. We have to be careful about that. It's not about necessarily judging our ancestors. It's about like, we still have the same consciousness. So few things really have changed ever since. We still have fears, we still have doubts, and above all, we still have ego. We still have negative trends in consciousness. And the idea is to put them aside, all these negative traits and trends, and start listening and seeing. It's not just listening or hearing, but really assimilating the fact of that goodness is what we have to choose all the time. So it's like sometimes what we want personally, what we desire, these egos, fantasies and illusions about control, about possessions, about greed, about doing things the way we want and not the way God wants us to. Those things really haven't changed. We still have the same attitude. So I know in many circumstances we're learning how to build or rebuild in this case. This is actually the rebuilding of Jerusalem. We are rebuilding our connection with God. That's what Jerusalem means, by the way. This is our connection with it. That's why I have to unite Jerusalem. We cannot have a divided Jerusalem. It's impossible. Because in order to have our connection with God, we have to unite every aspect of consciousness. And it's interesting that this is happening today. That we see that we have a divided Jerusalem, that we have enemies, that we have lower consciousness people. fighting for the control of our consciousness. So that we see all this evil in the world trying to really defeat goodness. So in this sense, Israel, the Jews living in Eretz Israel, in this country, represent exactly what the Torah wants, what God wants through the Torah, which is make us the messengers of doing or making goodness prevail. So we have to really remove these negative tendencies, these lower aspects of consciousness that are about destruction, that are about undignifying life, which are about of oppressing and humiliating the goodness that we inherently have. So we have to then fight them and remove them in the same way that over 3,000 years ago God commanded us in the Torah. We read it in the previous portions. Actually, last week in Masay, we are commanded to remove all the peoples living in this land. These people don't belong here. These lower aspects of consciousness do not belong with goodness. They don't. They actually are a nuisance, an obstacle, an obstruction to make goodness prevail. So in this sense, if we read the Torah, we just are the good guys. It is. I mean, just read it. So it's not just being the good guys for being the good guys. Our responsibility as being designed to be the good guys is to make goodness prevail. So we have to remove, literally remove completely the nations living in it, meaning the negative aspects of consciousness. That's what these nations are in the context of the Torah and the Hebrew Bible. And we have to remove that in order to make goodness prevail. That's the whole idea. And again, last week we read, we didn't comment it here because we don't have time to comment every aspect, every message of every portion of the Torah. But they were talking about not just removing the people, but also removing all the altars, idols, even stone idols or molten idols. And we were referring that there's a difference between the two of them. You know, the one that are inherently stone, like nature, for instance, things that we cannot change as a stone. So we're talking about rain, we're talking about wind, we're talking about fire. We cannot control those things. I mean, obviously, we're cooking, we can control the fire, but as a nature, as part of nature, as an element that are alien to us, we cannot control it. Because the heat is there. It's like we go to a volcanic area. How can we control this? How can we create devices to control eruptions, volcanic eruptions? We don't know that. We cannot control that. And also we cannot control the wind. We can't. Or the rain. When the rain comes, we can stop it. So those are the idols, the stone idols. These idols, these semi-gods, whatever, small, lesser gods, so to speak, that we cannot really control. Actually, we depend on them to live. We need water, we need rain, we need fire, we need air. And then the other one, the one that are molten, those are the ones that we do. So those are the other idols that the Torah is telling us. Like that two kind. The ones that are outside of you, like the powers of nature that we know exist. But then there are the other ones, the one that we create. It's important to go back on this. Because we have the commandment to remove them from our land. In this case, what is the promised land? The inherent goodness in our consciousness. That's what we're supposed to live. That's what we're destined to occupy. And make goodness prevail. That's the whole point. So then we have to pay attention to what are the idols, the stone idols and the molten idols, that we have to remove from this consciousness, from this the goodness, in order to make goodness prevail. So here in our blog, what we're trying to communicate is that the goodness is basically love's ways and attributes, everything that is coming from loving kindness, from God's loving kindness, from God's love, versus what we create. What is that we create? What are the molten idols? Our own fabricated, invented fantasies and illusions. You can call this greed, you can call this lust, we can call this arrogance. Everything that separates us from the unity, the oneness that goodness is, that God's, that love's is. So then we have a commandment then. So going back to this portion, Moses is reminding us, it's like, you've been troublemakers. It's like not being troublemakers. It's like we have really to start controlling and defeating, not just controlling, really removing every negative aspect and trend in consciousness in order to enter the land. So again, how do we translate this in our own consciousness individually? We have to start removing what we really don't need, what is stopping us to enjoy the goodness of love's ways and attributes. That doesn't let us settle in the land. The land where milk and honey flow. That's goodness. This is the sweetness, the good things of life. And this nurturing thing that makes us happy. It's like milk and honey are inherent to each other. It is sweet, therefore it's nurturing. It is nurturing, therefore is sweet. This is basically goodness. This is love, loving kindness. Then Moses is telling us, hey, I remind you of all these things, Devarim, that happened. So you just be aware what is the negative aspect that you still have to work on. So it's like Moses is not telling us it's over, yes, you made mistake, now you guys are perfect. No. That's exactly what this book is about. It's a call of attention to all Israel, all of us. Like we're not getting there yet. Meaning this promised land. We still have work to do. We have to remove the people living in there, plus their idols, their altars, the trees, everything that belongs to them. See, like the negative trait and aspects in consciousness that are not alone. They have other things. It's not just being negative. It's like, what is the qualities of negativity? Then we make a long list of things. Those are the idols. So we're not talking about just a specific trait. It's like not just a trait, what come with them. It's like, what does it mean to be, for example, the idol of being arrogant? So what are the idols? I mean, that's, let's say, one nation. Yeah, one of the 7 nations. Arrogance. Okay. Now, what are the idols of that particular nation? What are the things that accompany arrogance? Then we have traits, aspects, these little details that accompany being arrogant. So usually we have negative emotions that accompany that state. That's why the 7 nations belong to each other. So in other words, if we have arrogance, we have wrath, we have coveting, we have greed, we have envy. Actually, they look alike. Actually, this is about lack. It's about I want more. I don't have this. I want it. Either be a sensual thing or sexual. Either it could be material possession. Either it could be a quality in personality. We are upset. We're angry. Wrath, anger. It's in us. Why? Because we lack something. We are upset because we don't have something. We lost it. Or we try to get it and we can't. Then we have to find out what is that. And then the idol, the thing that we are addicted to, the thing that we are obsessed about, the thing that we are attached to. It's like, what is that? Those things that we think we lack and we need. So we have seriously to make an inventory. It's like, what is exactly that I covet, that I greed, that I lust for, that I envy? And then we will know what our idols are. And then we have to remove them from our consciousness in order to allow ourselves to live in the freedom of goodness. We have to understand that goodness, love, all the good things are the things that we really need. We don't need anything different than that. But of course, consumer society tells us, no, you have to get this too in order to be happy, in order to experience goodness. Consumer society is telling, no, goodness is not just a feeling. Goodness is about having. It's about behaving in a particular way. And then we fall in those idols, egos, fantasies, and illusions, then we have to deal with them. And then we became their slave. We had to work for decades in order to sustain these idols. And then where's our freedom? Yeah, I'm free having and working hard to what I like because this is what it is, life about. It's okay. Is that the choice? We have no problem. However, we're talking about the Jewish identity here. It doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. Why? Because we are not part of that nation's mentality of consumer society. Yeah, but you may argue, yeah, but Israel and Israelis and Jews are the same like anybody else. Yeah. Most of us, yes. But this is not what the Torah is telling us. So it's like, yeah, there may be lots of us who are not following the Jewish identity as the Torah is telling us to be and to have and to manifest. Yeah. But then we are the ones here, we're trying to say, hey, we're trying to be what the Torah is telling us. And adopt that belief, that consciousness, that mentality, that culture, unquote, so to speak, that approach to life. And I start changing, as we have said many times before, the pyramid, turning down the paradigm of the pyramid and turn it into a circle. Then we all will be happy because no one's above. But in order to get to that promised land, this circle is also the promised land, by the way. We have to remove all the remnants of the pyramid mentality, the I'm better than you, that inferior and superior. You have to start changing those references, the shifting paradigms. We have to. And the Torah is telling us here, Moshe Rabbeinu is reminding us. He's like, hey, when you went from this place and this place, you guys did this wrong. You fell lost in Kevrot Hatava, the graves of lust. Then before the golden calf, and then the negative report about the land. Hey, pay attention. You should learn from this. Yeah, we're not perfect, we're learning. But our teacher, Moses, who represents our highest knowledge of God, is Moses. Our higher consciousness, the one that knows better inside of us. Tell you, hey, pay attention. You down there, ego, conscious mind, subconscious mind, basic mind, whatever you want to call it. This is about focusing on what matters here. Those things for which we fell, the golden calf, the lust, the negative thinking, the stepping stones. Let's not go back there. You have to unite you all as a people, as a united consciousness, in order to go forward for a destination, for a purpose, which ultimately, as we have said, is the messianic consciousness. It's like the goodness that will prevail in all aspects, facets, and dimensions of life. That's the whole purpose, by the way. So the mission of Israel and the Torah is, hey, is settle in this land of goodness and be the light for the nations. Meaning, set up the example. Tell the nations, hey, you can share this goodness too. There's no need to go to idols. That we can learn from the goodness that life is, and that God is telling us to live in every dimension and level of life. So, after these accountings, which are several, as we have mentioned, the sin of the spies, etc., the wars. Then God tells Moses about the commandments that we need to start implementing once we are living in the land. In other words, we received the Torah in the desert, but most of the commandments, as we know, are to be applied, to be being done in the land. So for instance, we're approaching the Shemitah year, the year in which the land of Israel rests. We don't plant. Those commandments have to do with the land. Obviously, that are not applied to do them elsewhere. So the recountings continue, and let's remark something that we highlighted here, talking about the borders of Israel again. He said, I commanded Yeshua at that time, saying, Moses is talking now, your eyes have seen everything that God, the Lord your God, has done to these two kings, the kings that were defeated by God directly in our conquering of the land. They're talking about Og and the other king. So these two giants that were mentioned here. So anyway, I don't know, these two kings, so will Hashem do to all the kings where you cross over? Meaning, in other words, God helped us to defeat these two kings in order to enter, we're part of the land of Canaan. And he's telling Moses to tell Yeshua, don't be afraid, God also will fight your battles within, when you come to the land. So it's like, they're telling us, when we want to pursue the goodness of life, we're going to find obstacles. We're going to find major, big kings that are bigger than us, that we really cannot defeat it. It's impossible to defeat them. They're giants. Then God is telling us, yes, you have major obstacles in consciousness. I will help you remove them. I will defeat them for you. So this is not just about trust, it's about, as we said, our identity is part of our identity. It's like we know that God is with us, therefore He will fight our wars. But of course we have to be there to fight. Physically, that all levels of consciousness we have to put, like, I want goodness to prevail. Like we have to put our body, our soul, our heart, everything, in order to make this war, so to speak, this battle be won. But ultimately, we have to know that we're going to win this battle because God is with us. So like that things that really are bigger than us. The things that we really cannot control in our consciousness and outside. Then God is telling us, I will be with you. You don't have to do, it's like God is aware. This is very important, by the way. God is aware that we are not overpowerful and almighty, to defeat all the negative aspects of consciousness. He knows that. He created us. So yes, you have free will, you have these negative traits and trends in consciousness that you sometimes cannot control. That's why so many people who are addicted and obsessed and attached. They cannot control it. The point is that they don't cry out loud to God saying, get this out of me. This is bigger than me. I can't. I'm addicted. I have no will. I have no strength. It's too much for me. Then God will do it. But again, we have to start understanding that this strength is coming from us. God is within us. He created us. The Torah says that He infused His breath, His spirit in us. So He's within us. He's keeping us alive. He's giving us life. Therefore, this same spirit has the power to do anything. Because it comes from God, who is all-powerful. So let's take that into consideration. We have to make space for Him. Make me a place in your land so I can dwell in you, among you. It's in the Torah. Then we have to find out what that space is in our consciousness. We have to create a space for Him. In order to create a space, we have to remove something. Something that is not part of God's ways and attributes. So He doesn't blend, He doesn't mix, He doesn't coexist with negative things. That's clear. The Torah is telling us that very clear from the beginning, from day one. Like, He doesn't like anything bad. Why? It's good. So He's not advocating evil. Actually, He's against evil. And again, in a very wrathful and jealous, and a very ruthless way. But He's against evil. This is not that He's ruthless, it's not that He's wrathful, it's not that He's jealous. That's the way He approaches negative things. That's what we learn in here. So this is not about a guy with a long beard, and when he frowned, we had to run away because I'm going to kill you with thunderbolt or something like that. No, of course not. We have said this many times. Many times. that the jealousy, the wrath of God, this is what his reaction to anything different than his ways and attributes, which is goodness, by the way, which are what goodness. So it's not that he's imposing an agenda. It sounds like goodness is an agenda. Yeah, it is, but in goodness, everybody's happy. So it's like it has to be our agenda if we have common sense. Why? Are we masochists? No. So he's telling us to choose the brachot, to the blessings and life, because that's the goodness of life. Why the curses? Why death? Why negativity? Why? Of course not. So that's what he wants from us. It's for our own sake. We're not going to please him. Really. We know that. So then we have to do what we have to do for our own sake. And again, another underlying message here that we have to pay close attention is the fact that he created us. It's like, yeah, we have individuality, we have egos and that kind of thing, yes. We have a sense of individuality, we know that. But that doesn't make us gods of ourselves. And that doesn't compel us to be gods. Why? Because we are made by God. So everything we think, everything we create is part of his plan. Of course, we can claim credit. I painted this portrait or this landscape. I created this mathematical formula. I invented this particular computer program or this. We can say that, but ultimately that's an arrogant. It's a fantasy. Because ultimately everything that we have in our consciousness, our creativity, our talents, everything, God's put it there. So we have to thank God to be the vehicle, the means to do those inventions and those creations. It's like, wow, thank you. You're putting these words on me. You are allowing me to understand this greatness that you have bestowed in creation, the goodness that reflects it's not necessarily who he is, but your attributes. Then we will know that we are means, we are vehicles of his will. And that this divine plan is beyond our grasp, by the way. We want to control this. What is this plan about? What is this planet? Why are so different people, different countries? It's so complicated. Yeah, it is. And then, not to mention the universe, which is infinite to our perception. And then how tiny we are in this huge, unmeasurable creation. And then we realize that we are basically living in a fantasy trip. That all this reality that we have created in the world, where did it get us to? Where are we? Are we better? And then we start following what he's telling us in the Torah. Then we have an idea, a close understanding that this is about goodness, regardless our opinion, our judgments, our approach, our agenda. And then we start beginning to know who he is. I mean, not in terms of defining him, it's like really seeing his attributes manifest in the material world and in our consciousness. And we say, yeah, everything is about goodness. From beginning to end. And then we'll put egos aside and the negative trends and traits and qualities in consciousness and start engaging in this goodness. That is the purpose of creation. Because God is good, therefore, what comes from Him is also good. And there's no space, there's no room for anything different than goodness, unless we choose to. And then it's a learning process. It's like, well, I have been living all these years, 40, 50, 60, just to come to that conclusion. It's like, why did it take me so long? Yeah. But at least we're getting there. And once we realize that what matters is goodness in us and in our surroundings, then we start heralding the settling in this promised land at the starting point of making goodness prevail in the entire world and in the entire creation. And then we realize that that's the ultimate, that that's the messianic consciousness, the total freedom living in total goodness. That's what it's about, by the way. So, in the following ways, we're gonna hear more admonitions, more calling of attention from Moshe Rabbeinu to Israel, to us, to pay attention about our mistakes, to focus, to concentrate about what is ahead of us in this promised land, what are our duties, the wars that we have to fight in order to make goodness prevail. And then finally realize, fulfill, achieve our mission, our purpose in life as Jews, and as the goodness in general for everybody that God has bestowed in everything, specifically in us human beings. So, we invite you to again reflect on the Devarim, the sayings, the things that we have to take into consideration in order to really grasp our essence and true identity, who we really are, not egos, fantasies, and illusions, not what people, society, culture, country, tradition, history, whatever tells us to be, but what the Torah, what God is telling us to be. And realize that this is about goodness, and to make goodness prevail. So, with this invitation to assimilate, to integrate these blessings of goodness in every level, aspect, dimension, facets of life, we wish you an abundantly blessed week. Shabbat Shalom, and until next week.